I remember staring at my phone, thumb hovering over the screen, waiting for that familiar ping of excitement. But when it came, it didn't feel like excitement at all. The invitation was there, bright, cheerful, decorated with pastel pinks and tiny golden confetti icons. Sarah's baby shower. It screamed. Except my name wasn't on it. I blinked. Blinked again. Surely my eyes were lying. I called her. "Hey Sarah, got your invite." My voice cracked before I could stop it. "Oh, hey, yeah. We're just keeping it small," she said, a little too fast. "You know, family and some close friends." Close friends? My heart thumped against my ribs too loud. We've been best friends for what, 12 years? Yeah, her voice trailed. There was hesitation. And maybe guilt? "I just thought you said understand." Understand? I swallowed, tasting bitterness on my tongue. Understand what? Silence. Then, I'd to know. Maybe we just wanted it to be intimate. I laughed, a hollow sound bouncing off the walls of my kitchen. Intimate, right? Of course. I hung up before the tears came. My hand shook as I set the phone down. My family peeked in, smiling. "You okay?" my mom asked. "Yeah, fine," I lied, plastering a smile that felt like paper over a wound. "I sipped and not going. Just too busy." My dad nodded, clueless. "All right, kiddo." I walked away, stomach knotting. Every memory of Sarah flashed in my mind like a slideshow I couldn't stop. Our midnight talks, secrets shared over chocolate bars, crying over boys, laughing till our sides hurt, was that all nothing to her now? I sat on my bed, scrolling through old messages, pictures of us, arm in arm, smiling like the world was ours. My chest tightened with each photo. Why me? Was it something I said? Something I did? Or something I didn't do? I typed a message, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. Finally my fingers moved. "Hey, congrats on the shower. Wish I could be there." I hit send, forcing politeness like a mask over my rage. I stared at the ceiling, replaying our conversations in my head. "Remember that time you stood up for me in 10th grade?" I whispered to the dark. "And I promised I stepped always be there for you." The silence answered back. Nothing. It hurt, more than I thought it would. It wasn't just a party, it was a choice, a line drawn, and I was outside it. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe she thought I'd be too dramatic, too much. Maybe she didn't want me there because of some silly misunderstanding. But every excuse I made felt weak, hollow. I clenched my fists. My nails dug into my palms. Pain grounded me, reminded me I was alive. "I can't believe you," I muttered under my breath. Not at her, at the betrayal, at the friend I thought I knew. I called my other friends, those in my inner circle. They were shocked. She didn't invite you." One whispered, disbelief lacing her voice. "Not even your name?" another asked. "Nope." My voice was steady but my heart pounded. She erased me." There was a pause. Then, "You okay?" I laughed softly. "I will be. I just need to figure out what comes next." That's when it hit me. The sting wasn't just betrayal. It was clarity. A quiet, simmering determination. I didn't know what shape it would take. I didn't know when or how, but the seed had been planted. And I would water it. Because some friendships, some people, you can't let them decide your worth. I picked up my phone again, not to text her, not to beg, not to explain. I just stared at it, and for the first time in hours, I felt a spark. A spark that whispered, "This isn't sped over." Days passed like slow-motion disasters. Nights were worse. My eyes burned from staring at the ceiling. My thoughts looping over that damn invitation, the one I wasn't on. I traced the edges of the card in my mind, imagining her handwriting, my name missing. Every time I remembered it, a spark of heat flared in my chest, and I felt my stomach twist. "Mom?" I whispered one morning, trying to sound normal. She peeked into my room, coffee mug in hand, hair messy like mine. "You barely slept." "Everything okay, honey?" I forced a laugh, small, brittle. "Yeah, just tired." Her eyes narrowed, worried. "You stir quiet, more than usual. Something bothering you?" I shook my head. "Nothing, really." She lingered, then left with a soft, "If you want to talk, I say I'm here." I closed the door and sank onto my bed, hugging my knees. Her concern felt like knives. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to scream about Sarah, about how my best friend could erase me with a few clicks. But the words lodged in my throat. Dad joined us at breakfast. Unaware. You've been spacing out, he said between bites. Work okay? Fine, I muttered. My fork scraped against the plate louder than I expected. You're lying, he said flatly, looking at me over his coffee. I blinked. He always saw too much. I said I'm fine, I snapped, immediately regretting it. You sir not. His voice was gentle, patient. Talk to us. I swallowed a lump of shame and anger. I don't want to make a big deal. Big deal? It was a universe-shattering deal. The betrayal stung, gnawed at me, but I forced a mask over my face. At work it was the same. Smiles plastered, meetings attended, notes taken, calls answered, but inside I was unraveling, a storm behind a calm surface. Great presentation, by the way, my colleague said. Thanks, I murmured, eyes on my laptop, replaying moments with Sarah. She was everywhere in my memory. The time she held my hand at the unemployment office, whispering, "You shall bounce back." The vacations we planned, laughing till our ribs hurt. The midnight calls when I cried over heartbreaks, over failures. And then, the invite. My absence. I scribbled in my journal late at night, pen slicing into paper. How could she? After everything. Do I confront her, or vanish from her perfect world? Sometimes I wrote fantasies of exposure. I imagined sending her an anonymous note, or showing up at the shower uninvited, or posting on social media. Some friends erase you, some celebrate you, guess which is which. Other nights I wished I could disappear, slip into a quiet life, no hurt, no betrayal. But the pen never rested. My thoughts circled, restless, anger and sadness tangled into something raw and sharp. One morning, Mom came in again. You still awake? I couldn't sleep, I admitted, voice hoarse. You've barely eaten. I shook my head. I slept in fine. Abdul, she hesitated, using my real name like a lifeline. You don't have to carry everything alone. I swallowed. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to pour it out, let the tears fall in her lap, but the betrayal wasn't just sadness. It was humiliation. And humiliation, I decided, was private. Later that day, I stared out the window at the city buzzing below. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, tight shoulders. I whispered to my reflection. I once beg. I once crawl back into her world. That night, I wrote again. But this time it wasn't venting. It was planning. The anger that had been simmering began to solidify into something colder, sharper. She thinks I'll stay quiet, I wrote. She thinks I'll forget. She's wrong. The words felt like armor. I pictured a life where I dictated my own worth, where her invitations or lack thereof meant nothing, where betrayal didn't define me. Sleep came eventually. Not restful, not peaceful, but it came, and when I woke, the decision lingered in my chest like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. I would step back from her world. I would let her believe she'd won, while I built something she couldn't touch. A quiet strength settled in me, not loud, not dramatic, but steady, solid. The next morning, I smiled at my reflection, not the fake, polite smile I gave the world. A small, determined curve of my lips. I whispered, almost to myself, "You shall see, you shall regret it, but on my terms." And for the first time in weeks I felt a flicker of something powerful, control, choice, revenge, not yet action, but the spark of it. I closed my journal and set it aside. No more tears, no more silent mornings. I had decided. I wouldn't beg for my place in her world. I would take mine elsewhere. And if she noticed or regretted it, well, that would be on her. The whispers hit me before I even touched my laptop. Did you hear about Sarah's shower? One of my coworkers asked, sipping her coffee like she didn't know I was in the room. Oh, it's going to be extravagant. Another said, they renting out that ballroom downtown. Gift registry is insane. I think I saw a diamond bracelet on there. I froze. The words sank like stones. My chest tightened. Wow, I said, voice quiet, forcing a smile. That sep's nice. Yeah, she said, glancing at me. You not going? I shook my head, fingers stiff around my coffee mug. Nah, I have plans. Plans lies, but they fit better than the truth. I sat at my desk, pretending to type, eyes glazed over. Inside I was unraveling. Invisible, humiliated, not publicly no, but painfully private. Every detail they mentioned, dug into me, reopened the wound that hadn't stopped bleeding since I saw that invitation. I remembered Sarah laughing that night over some old photo. "We're like sisters," she'd said. Her voice now echoed in my skull, hollow and cruel. I glanced across the office, noticing people whispering, glancing at their phones. I imagined them at the shower, laughing with her, celebrating a life I was excluded from. My hands trembled, but then, I saw cracks. Tiny ones, almost imperceptible. Her stress was subtle at first. A sharp tone at her husband over something trivial. A snapped comment at her sister when she accidentally spilled wine. I'd watch her Instagram stories with a quiet, calculating attention, noting moments where the perfect facade wavered. "Sarah seems tense lately," my colleague said, scrolling her phone. "I mean, she's always so polished. But these past weeks..." I smiled faintly, hiding it. That smile was dangerous. That smile was me noticing the first flicker of strategy. Maybe karma didn't have to wait. I opened a fresh page in my notebook. Digital, yes, but personal. I wrote, "Observation. Sarah, controlling, easily triggered, stress points, husband, family, work, public generosity. Known charity donors, weaknesses perfectionism, desire for admiration, fear of social judgment." My heartbeat quickened as I scribbled details from memory, events she attended, photos she posted, the charity fundraiser she hyped last month. I even noted the local birth center struggling to get funds. Each line fueled me, not anger exactly, not yet. A cold, methodical power settled over my chest. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A group chat with old friends. Someone sent a photo of the shower decorations, soft pinks, white balloons, golden letters spelling out the baby's name. I stared at it, and instead of jealousy, I felt patience. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "Not yet, Sarah, not yet." The office was loud around me, but I felt isolated in a bubble of focus. Every smile I gave coworkers, every nod in meetings was performance. Inside, I was mapping her world, charting her public life, her pride, her little obsessions. I noticed patterns. She always posted her generosity first, then herself second. Gifts, donations, accolades. She craved recognition. And I remembered the birth center. They were short on funds, a place helping mothers like the ones she'd pretend to champion. Quiet, unnoticed. Like me. I jotted that down too. Idea: leverage her public generosity. Highlight unnoticed needs. Redirect attention. Silent, precise, unavoidable. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. My anger wasn't just reaction, it was strategy, a path forming from humiliation to control. By evening, I closed my laptop and exhaled. My hands were shaky, but my mind felt alive. I walked past Sarah's office building mentally, imagining her snapping at staff, curling her hair obsessively, brushing off tiny inconveniences with forced smiles, vulnerabilities, flaws. Everyone saw her perfect Instagram life, but I saw the cracks. The thought made my lips curl. I didn't need to confront her directly. Not yet, not until I had the pieces in place, until I could turn the public performance of perfection against her. "Are you leaving?" a coworker asked, shaking me from my reverie. "Yeah," I said, voice calm, measured. Early day. Outside, the city air felt electric. I let it fill my lungs. I wasn't running from my anger. I wasn't crying in secret anymore. I was mapping, noting, planning. And for the first time in weeks, the humiliation faded. It was replaced by something sharper. Intent, power, quiet revenge forming like smoke in my chest. I whispered into the wind, alone on the sidewalk. "You think this is all about a party? You think you Steph won? Watch closely, Sarah, watch." And dawn set blink. I walked home, journal tucked under my arm. My steps were lighter than they'd been in months. Not because the wound had healed, it hadn't, not yet, but because I had discovered something far more dangerous than anger. Control, and control is patient. The birth center smelled faintly of disinfectant and hope. I stepped inside, and the chatter of nurses and soft coos of newborns hit me like a wall of warmth I didn't expect. Clara, the director, looked up from a stack of papers, smiling tiredly. "Can I help you?" "I want to make a donation," I said, keeping my voice even, polite, neutral. "Community support." "Thought I set, drop by in person." Her eyes softened. "That sip's wonderful. We said are always in need. Come with me." I followed her down the narrow corridor. Posters of newborn milestones and hand-painted murals lined the walls. Tiny feet stickers. Tiny hands. The room hummed with life. "This is our main ward," Clara said, gesturing to a room with a couple of cribs and sleeping infants. "We do what we can with what we have." I nodded. "It's sup's beautiful, full of hope." She laughed softly. "Hope is all we've got some days." I signed the donation papers at her desk, my pen scratched across the forms, and I felt a pulse of something sharp and thrilling. Every line I wrote, every dollar I committed, was more than charity. It was calculated. A whisper of satisfaction curled in my chest. Clara glanced at the numbers. "This is generous. We can fund a lot with this." I smiled faintly. "I know. I want to make a difference." Her eyes were warm, grateful. "You just did." I left the office and paused in the lobby, watching the nurses bustle by, carrying tiny bundles of life, and I thought of Sarah. She would never know. She didn't see the struggle behind these walls, the lives quietly fought for, the mothers who had no diamonds, no lavish showers, no Instagram-worthy applause. And yet here I was, funding life, quietly, privately, perfectly. I whispered to myself, "This isn't set just about charity, it sets about balance, karma in slow motion." I remembered her invitation, her smug smile when she typed it, blissfully unaware of my absence. Every exclusion, every silent "you're not enough," and now every dollar I gave was a rebuke. Subtle, elegant, invisible to everyone but me. Clara returned, holding a small envelope. "If you such like, we can show your donation in our monthly newsletter." I shook my head. "No, keep it quiet." She nodded. "Of course. It's steps for the families, not the recognition." Exactly. Quiet, private, perfect. I walked out into the late afternoon sun, the city bustling around me, but I felt insulated, protected by purpose. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the raw, burning way. I was sharp, calculated, empowered. Every step I took was deliberate, every breath measured. Back at home, I sat at my desk and opened a new document on my laptop. Observation: Sarah, public generosity, craving recognition. Action support causes she claims to champion, ensure visibility to local networks, but remain anonymous. Create ripple effect. I smiled, dark and small, letting the warmth of strategy replace the sting of betrayal. Later that week, I returned to the center, volunteering for a couple of hours. I held tiny hands, wrapped blankets, cleaned counters. Every laugh from a mother, every sigh of relief from a nurse, fed the quiet satisfaction inside me. "Thank you," Clara said as I was leaving. "This it helps more than you know." I nodded, smiling faintly. "It steps nothing. Just glad I can help." Outside, I pulled my coat tighter and whispered almost like a vow, "Sarah, this is where I win, without you even knowing." It wasn't about being seen. It wasn't about confrontation. It was about the statement, invisible but undeniable. I could build, create, heal, and she would remain blinded by her own arrogance. That evening, I pored over the list of donors and community supporters. I jotted names, dates, events, connections she frequented. I traced potential touchpoints, subtle ways to highlight her claimed generosity against reality. Every note, every calculation brought a thrill. I realized I wasn't just helping a center. I was reclaiming my own power. Every silent donation was a testament. I could choose life where she chose exclusion. I could support where she discarded. And it felt intoxicating. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small, invisible, betrayed. I felt like a force contained in quiet elegance, moving under the radar, watching, waiting, calculating. I closed my journal and exhaled a long, deep breath that carried the satisfaction of agency. No confrontation needed, no drama, just quiet, undeniable action. I whispered into the dark, words meant only for me. "Plant the seed, let it grow. Watch what blooms without you, Sarah. Watch it all." And with that thought, I felt a sense of purpose, sharp and alive. The first taste of quiet revenge settled in my chest, a slow burn that promised more. I wasn't just healing, I was building, and she wouldn't even see it coming. Weeks passed. Sarah's social media feed glowed with pastel perfection: balloons, ribbons, tiny shoes, perfectly wrapped gifts. Best day ever, she typed, tagging everyone she could. Her smile beamed from every photo. I scrolled past it, thumb hovering, and didn't flinch. I let her perfection wash over me. I let it fuel me. Then the whispers began. At lunch, Jenna leaned in, voice low, conspiratorial. Did you hear about the new donor at the birth center? Generous, anonymous, very impactful. Anonymous? I asked casually, pretending curiosity. Yes, she said, swirling her coffee. No one knows who it is. The director just mentioned it. I let that sit. A slow, dark satisfaction curling in my chest. Later, in a group chat with mutual friends, someone typed, Sarah, do you know who donated that huge sum to the birth center? No idea, came the reply. Really? I watched, quiet, savoring the confusion in her responses. You guys, seriously, who did this? She typed, practically vibrating through the screen. We don't know, Clara just said anonymous. One friend replied. The thrill wasn't guilt. It was power. My plan was working silently, elegantly. She was forced to confront generosity that excluded her ego, and the best part, she didn't know it was me. Not yet. I leaned back in my chair, eyes narrowing. Perfect, I whispered under my breath. At brunch that weekend, I joined our circle, laughing politely at stories I wasn't a part of. Sarah sat across from me, brow furrowed, scrolling on her phone, whispering questions to friends. Do you know anything about this donation? She asked quietly, voice tight. I've heard of it, one friend replied cautiously. But it steps all anonymous. Clara didn't step to give any names. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. Her fingers tapped the table nervously. She looked up at me, briefly, and I smiled. Not mockingly, just faintly, like the calm before a storm. She didn't know. She couldn't see it in me yet. And that was the point. Maybe it's someone from outside our circle, another friend suggested. Her eyes darted around the table. Really? Outside? I listened, savoring the tension in her voice, the subtle lines of frustration etching across her forehead. Every micro-expression was a confirmation. My plan was invisible but effective. Later that evening, I scrolled through the birth center's newsletter. There it was, a note thanking an anonymous donor for a life-changing contribution. Photos of smiling mothers, infants in clean cribs, nurses beaming with relief. I paused, letting the image sink in. I whispered to myself, dark and soft, every dollar, every life touched a silent rebuke. I imagined her discovering it eventually, the gnawing realization that someone she never included, someone she underestimated, was quietly undermining her sense of superiority, her curated image. Her posts had celebrated herself, her generosity, her social standing, and yet the world shifted quietly, without her ego even noticing. I leaned back, hands clasped over my stomach, letting satisfaction settle in. She'll never see it coming, I murmured to the empty room. And when she does, it'll bloom, slow, unstoppable. That week, messages pinged in my group chat. Clara mentioned an anonymous donor again. Huge impact. Can set wait to see who it is. Crazy. I thought it was Sarah. Nope. Completely anonymous. Just amazing. I smiled faintly. My pulse quickened. The thrill wasn't loud. It wasn't celebratory. It was subtle, elegant. Every whisper, every unanswered question, every confused glance Sarah threw in group chats or brunches added fuel to my quiet fire. And I realized something. This wasn't about vengeance in the traditional sense. I didn't need confrontation. I didn't need public humiliation. The elegance of invisibility was sweeter than any argument or shout. I pictured her scrolling her feed later that night, reading the newsletters, seeing the babies, the mothers, the nurses thriving because of an anonymous benefactor, and she wouldn't know. Not yet. I whispered again, just to myself. It's steps not about being seen, it's steps about being effective, being powerful, being inevitable. The satisfaction was private, yes, but potent, electric. I could feel it in my veins. Every morning I checked social media, watched her posts, her frustration, her subtle panic at the unknown, and every time I smiled quietly. This was my revenge. Silent, controlled, patient. And eventually, she would understand. But not tonight, not tomorrow, not yet. I closed my laptop, leaning back, letting the thrill of invisible success sink into me. I wasn't just healing, I was orchestrating, and every life touched by my quiet intervention was a note in the symphony of my plan. Sarah thought she was untouchable, thought her perfection shielded her. I whispered into the dark, letting the words linger in the air, not anymore. And with that, I felt the power of patience, of quiet strategy. The seed was planted, invisible but alive. I would let it grow, slowly, elegantly. And one day, when the truth finally unfurled in her hands, she would know exactly who had quietly outmaneuvered her. Sarah was unraveling, and I watched it happen from a distance. It started small, a text to her husband Jake, whispered complaints about the anonymous donor. "Jake, I don't set understand," she typed. "Who would do this? I feel overlooked. It seeps like someone is undermining me." I imagined his brow furrowed as he read it. "Sarah, calm down, it steps anonymous. Doesn't matter who it is." But it does matter. I could hear her voice echoing in my mind. Sharp, high-pitched, brittle. I sep's supposed to be the one helping, the one celebrated. And now, who is this stranger stealing my spotlight? I leaned back in my chair, sipping coffee slowly. This was the vindication I hadn't known I needed. Not a confrontation, not a public spectacle, just quiet observation. At work, I smiled through meetings, nodded through small talk, balanced my daily routines like a tightrope walker, but inside I was calm, precise. Every whisper of her paranoia, every subtle question she threw at mutual friends, it all fed a private thrill. That afternoon my phone buzzed. A call from Mom. "Abdul, are you sitting down?" she asked, voice tense. "I am. What spit's wrong?" She hesitated. "It's Sep's Sarah. Sep's been asking a lot of questions about the birth center. About donations. People are talking. Some friends are questioning her generosity, wondering if she's Sep's really selfless or just performing for attention." I let that sink in. A slow, satisfying heat spread through me. "So, she's feeling it?" I asked carefully. "Neutral? Calm?" "Yes," Mom said, voice barely above a whisper. "And she doesn't set like it. She keeps trying to figure out who did it. It's Sep's eating at her." I smiled faintly, not cruelly, not outwardly, just the quiet, sharp satisfaction of a plan working exactly as it should. "Good," I said softly. "That Sep's fair." Mom chuckled, nervous but warm. "You sound pleased." "I am," I admitted. "It Sep's poetic in a way." I hung up and stared out the window at the city. Cars moved like ants, oblivious, and I felt a kinship with the anonymity of it all. My revenge didn't need shouting. It didn't need exposure. It was precise, invisible, elegant. Later, I thought about fairness, about justice, about the years of friendship I'd poured into someone who erased me with a simple click, about the quiet humiliation I had endured. And now, it was balance. I pictured Sarah pacing in her apartment, phone clutched, texting Jake, whispering complaints to friends, scanning newsletters for clues, replaying moments where she could have included me but didn't. The cracks in her polished life were tiny but growing. "Jake," she might have said, voice trembling. "Do you think people are noticing that my generosity maybe isn't set what I thought it was?" He said, try to soothe her. "Sarah, it steps fine. You step done so much. Done a step worry about it." "Fine? Fine?" I imagined her repeating, frustration building. "Fine doesn't feel fine." I caught my reflection in the window as I sipped tea. Tired eyes, steady hands, calm breathing. I was grounded, strategic, empowered. I realized something crucial. Revenge doesn't need confrontation. It doesn't need drama. It needs patience, subtlety, precision. And I had it. That night, I wrote in my journal, pen scratching against paper. Observation: Sarah, cracks widening. Stress points: ego, social perception, recognition, friends beginning to question her motives. Husband aware but cautious. Opportunity: watch, remain invisible, let consequences bloom naturally. I paused, rereading the words. A quiet thrill hummed through me. Every dollar, every visit to the birth center, every invisible act of support had done its work. I didn't need to be seen. I didn't need applause, just results. I remembered the exclusion, the sting of the invitation, the cold realization that someone I had trusted could erase me. I clenched my pen, heart steady, feeling a sharp satisfaction. I whispered under my breath, almost to myself, "This is fair, this is justice." Quiet, elegant, invisible justice. A notification buzzed on my phone. A group chat update, Sarah venting again, asking mutual friends if anyone knew anything about the donor. Their responses were vague. She wasn't getting answers. Frustration leaked through her words. I smiled faintly, a careful curve of lips. That thrill wasn't loud, wasn't messy. It was subtle, controlled, satisfying. Later I called Mom back. "She'll learn eventually," I said, "and when she does, she'll understand the difference between performing generosity and living it." Mom laughed softly. "You sound peaceful, but pleased." "I am," I said. "There's a balance now, and it doesn't need confrontation to work." I hung up and sat quietly, letting the realization settle. Revenge, I understood now, wasn't about drama. It was about precision, about creating consequences that flowed naturally from actions, invisible but undeniable. And Sarah, perfect, polished, untouchable Sarah, was experiencing exactly that. I closed my journal, leaning back in my chair, calm, focused, patient. My life remained ordinary on the surface. Work, errands, small routines, but beneath it all a quiet satisfaction pulsed. I had not just survived betrayal, I had transformed it into fairness, into quiet vindication. And that vindication was mine, entirely. No confrontation necessary, no spectacle, just subtle, invisible truth unfolding. I whispered to myself in the dark, "This is what quiet power feels like, and it's intoxicating." I let the thought linger. I let it settle, and I knew deep down that the cracks in her perfect life were only the beginning. The fundraiser was buzzing. Warm lights, soft chatter, polished floors reflecting the glow of chandeliers. I could feel the tension of the crowd, but not mine. I moved through it like I belonged, and this time I truly did. "Welcome, Miss Wahab." Clara greeted me, her smile genuine and bright. "Thank you for coming. Everyone is eager to meet you." I nodded, calm, measured. "Of course," I said, "I'm happy to be here." She guided me to the stage for the public acknowledgements. I could see Sarah across the room, laughing with friends, her eyes scanning, unconsciously searching for familiarity, for control. Clara tapped the microphone. "Before we begin, we like to recognize someone whose generosity has transformed this center, someone whose dedication and care go beyond words." My heart thumped softly, a steady drum of satisfaction. "Abdul Wahab." The camera flashed. The crowd erupted in polite applause, gasps, murmurs. I stepped forward, accepting the modest bouquet Clara handed me. "Abdul has been an incredible supporter," Clara continued, voice warm and proud. "Not just a donor, but a presence, a force for change. Every child, every mother here has benefited from their compassion. We are truly grateful." I smiled, quietly, letting the words settle over the room. Eyes followed me. Phones clicked. I felt the invisible currents of attention shift. Across the room, Sarah's expression changed. Her perfect smile faltered. Her eyes widened slightly, the color draining from her cheeks. Whispers rose around her, subtle but undeniable. Did you know?" one friend murmured, nudging her shoulder. "Know what?" Sarah asked, voice tight, fragile. "That donation? It's Abdul," another whispered. She froze, mouth opening, closing, a laugh she couldn't summon, hands gripping her champagne flute. I stood there, calm, composed, heart racing not from malice but from satisfaction. Quiet, elegant, just. "Abdul? The one she excluded from everything?" Someone else murmured nearby. I let the sound of whispers drift through me, a slow pulse of vindication. No shouting, no confrontation, just presence, just truth. Clara stepped aside, letting me speak. "It's such an honor to support this center. It's been deeply meaningful. Every life touched here is a reminder that small actions, quiet actions, can change everything." I let my gaze sweep the room, landing briefly on Sarah. Her friends exchanged glances, some curious, some uncomfortable. She looked exposed. Her social mask, flawless just moments ago, slipping. Abdul, one friend asked hesitantly, how did Yusuf been so quiet about this? I prefer it that way, I said softly. The work is what matters, not the attention. Whispers erupted again. A few phones snapped pictures. A soft murmur of admiration floated across the crowd. Sarah's face was pale now, lips pressed into a thin line. Her posture stiffened, her composure cracking. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her friends tried to offer words, but she waved them off, searching my face for something. Recognition? A hint of humility? I gave none. I let a gentle, almost imperceptible smile play on my lips. Not cruel, just satisfied. Justice had arrived, subtle and complete. Clara returned, whispering, You've done something remarkable here. People will remember this. I nodded, feeling the truth of it. The quiet strategy, the patience, the invisible acts of support, they had all led to this. Sarah had excluded me, erased me. Life had corrected that exclusion in the most elegant way possible: visibility, recognition, control of the narrative. I didn't need to gloat. The room, the flashes, the whispers, they did it for me. Later I mingled briefly, accepting congratulations, exchanging polite smiles. I watched Sarah avoid direct eye contact, glance toward me and away, trapped between disbelief and fury. She had no clue how this had been orchestrated. No clue that every anonymous donation, every quiet visit had built toward this exact moment. A friend leaned in, whispering, she looks stunned. I nodded slightly. Yes, stunned and rightfully so. Sarah finally excused herself, flustered, leaving the room briefly. I watched her retreat, her social control unraveling. Alone, I whispered to myself, soft and precise. This isn't set malice, this is justice, quiet, elegant, true. The crowd continued, unaware of the intricate story behind the recognition, unaware of the patience, the planning, the months of quiet observation. I let them be, I let the moment be mine. As the event wound down, Clara approached again. Thank you, Abdul. Truly, Youssef reminded everyone here that integrity, quiet persistence, and care can change lives. I nodded. It's been my honor. Walking home later, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement, and I felt something rare: complete closure. The sting of exclusion, the betrayal, the private humiliation, all of it transformed into this moment of quiet vindication. No confrontation, no dramatic speeches, just life aligning, showing me that patience and precision could speak louder than any outburst. And Sarah, once untouchable, once flawless in her curated perfection, had been forced, however briefly, to witness truth. My truth. I whispered again into the night, letting the words linger in the cold air. This is life's justice. Quiet, beautiful, inevitable. And for the first time in months, I smiled freely, calm and steady, heart full, knowing that my power, real, subtle, unstoppable, had finally been revealed. The morning light spilled softly through the birth center windows. It felt like a benediction, quiet and warm. I took a slow breath, letting it fill my lungs. The air smelled faintly of soap, baby powder, and promise. Clara greeted me with a smile that no longer carried urgency, just calm gratitude. Good morning, Abdul. It's wonderful to see you again. Morning, Clara, I said, letting the words flow gently, easily. It's good to be here. She gestured toward a small group of mothers, their infants nestled against them. Come, I want you to meet everyone. I followed, feeling the subtle weight of joy in the room. Tiny fingers curled around mine, tiny yawns and soft coos. Every glance I received carried gratitude, hope, relief. I had touched lives here, quietly, intentionally, profoundly. One mother looked up at me, smiling shyly. Thank you, for everything. I don't even know your name, but thank you. I knelt slightly, meeting her gaze. You don't need to know me, I said softly. Just focus on you and your baby. That's enough. Her eyes glistened, and I felt something swell inside me. Not pride, not malice, just quiet strength. Later, Clara and I sat in her small office. She poured tea, the steam curling in the warm morning light. You've done more than anyone could imagine, she said. Not just financially, but with your presence. You've given these mothers more than they can repay. I smiled faintly, hands wrapped around the cup. Learned a lot myself, Clara, about patience, about power, in ways I never imagined. She nodded, thoughtful. You've changed things here, and I think you've changed yourself too. I let the silence stretch between us, letting the truth settle. Sarah's face, her exclusion, her whispers, her obsession, all of it no longer carried weight. I realized my value was never in anyone else's approval. Not hers, not anyone's. Mom had called the other day, voice soft and cautious. Abdul, I think you start finally seeing it. You don't need anyone to validate you. You've proven it yourself. I remembered that conversation, her warmth through the phone, and I nodded internally. Yes, I had. I leaned back in the chair, sipping tea slowly, letting the aroma calm me. Learned kindness. I whispered to Clara, is nest weakness, it steps power, and cruelty can touch it. She smiled. That's beautiful, Abdul, and true. You've turned pain into something meaningful, something transformative. I thought of Sarah, the exclusion, the humiliation, the silent revenge I orchestrated. And then I thought of the mothers I'd helped, the children I'd supported, the ripple effect of quiet actions that spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. No apology needed, I murmured. Not from her, not anymore, it doesn't change what I've built. Clara tilted her head, and that's exactly the point. You didn't act for recognition or revenge. You acted for good. Yes, I said, letting the word stretch. I acted for myself, for life that matters, for resilience, not rage. Later I walked through the main hall, watching mothers interact with nurses, babies swaddled, laughter soft and warm. Every step grounded me further. Every smile I received reminded me that my power was quiet, inherent, enduring. I paused at a crib, fingers brushing the tiny blanket. You safe, I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. You cared for. You have hope. And in that moment, I finally allowed myself to smile. Not a smile fueled by revenge, not by malice, but a smile born from endurance, growth, and resilience. Walking outside into the afternoon sun, I felt light, free, balanced. Life had delivered its quiet justice, but it had also gifted me clarity. My value is mine alone, my kindness is stronger than cruelty. My presence matters more than exclusion ever could. Mom called later that evening. Abdul, I'm proud of you, not for what you did to her, but for how you carried yourself. You've risen. I've learned, I said softly, letting my words sink into the quiet of the night. That strength isn't loud. It doesn't need applause. It's is this. Calm, controlled, certain. Clara sent a brief message too. Later, thank you for everything. You've shown us all what true impact looks like. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of the journey settle. From heartbreak to strategy, from silent revenge to true purpose, I had emerged unbroken. The pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, all had led to this clarity, not victory over another person, victory over the limitations imposed by others' cruelty. I whispered to myself, the city quiet around me. I am enough, I am seen, I am powerful, quietly, completely. And for the first time in months I felt the simple, profound truth of resilience. Life hadn't just tested me, it had made me, hardened me, refined me, and I had turned it all into something meaningful, something lasting. I smiled, letting the moment stretch, not for revenge, not for recognition, but for myself. I was wounded once, but now, I was whole. And I was in control. The city moved around me like it always had. Cars hummed, children's laughter echoed down narrow streets, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the corner bakery. I walked past the birth center, taking it all in. Mothers waved as I approached, babies in their arms, tiny hands reaching out to touch me. Abdul, one woman called softly, a smile stretching across her face. You've changed so much for us, thank you. I smiled, bending slightly to meet her gaze. It's nothing compared to what you do every day. I said, you stir the real strength here. A little boy tugged at my sleeve, eyes wide and curious. Abdul, he exclaimed. Look, I drew this for you. I crouched down, taking the crayon-scrawled paper from his hands. A shaky sun, a house, a small family of stick figures. I traced the lines gently, a soft chuckle escaping me. "This is amazing," I whispered. "You've got talent. You know that." The boy beamed. "I want to be just like you when I grow up." I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with recognition or applause. The smiles, the gratitude, the lives touched, was my reward. Quiet, invisible to anyone who didn't take the time to notice. "Abdul," Clara called from the doorway, holding a stack of folders. "I just wanted to check in, everything running smoothly." "Smoothly enough," I replied. "Thanks for everything, Clara. Really." She smiled, a knowing curve of her lips. "You've done more than you realize, not just for these families, but for all of us. You've shown what quiet strength looks like." I nodded, feeling the truth settle. Strength, resilience, kindness, they weren't loud, they didn't need to be. They were subtle. Persistent, transformative. A friend of mine waved from across the street. "A bottle, dinner tonight? Your treat?" I laughed softly. "Sure, I said'll meet you there." As I walked away, I let my mind drift briefly to Sarah. A faint shadow blurred at the edges of memory. She no longer held power over me. Her exclusion, her obsession, her need to control, all of it was irrelevant now. She was a note in the background, a quiet reminder of lessons learned. Some people measure life by what they can take, others by what they create. I stopped for a moment, watching a mother adjust her scarf around her baby, the child giggling softly. I felt a subtle pride, not for revenge, not for recognition, but for the fact that my actions, patient, careful, deliberate, had created real change. Months of planning, of silent observation, of quiet generosity, had delivered a satisfaction far deeper than any confrontation could have. I hadn't needed to prove anything to her. Life had done that elegantly, invisibly. A small group of children ran past me, squealing and laughing. One tripped, then looked up at me with wide, trusting eyes. "I'm okay," he shouted. "You're okay," I said gently, helping him steady himself. "See? Stronger than you think." I continued walking, my pace unhurried, my chest light. Friends complimented me as I passed, noting my dedication, my quiet generosity, the way I carried myself. Each word reinforced a simple truth. Power lies not in bitterness or anger, but in creating value that others cannot ignore. I found a quiet bench nearby, and sat, watching the world move. Mothers tended to their children, babies cooed, and the air carried the soft hum of life continuing, thriving. I whispered softly to myself, a private acknowledgement. I gave life, I gave hope. She lost the illusion of control, and I emerged whole. A gentle breeze brushed my face. It carried with it everything I had endured, every sleepless night, every pang of exclusion, every quiet plan laid out in meticulous patience. And now it was gone, replaced with clarity, resilience, and peace. Clara approached once more, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You've done well, Abdul. Life has a way of rewarding patience and integrity." I looked at her, a slow smile forming. "It has," I admitted, "and in ways I never expected." As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the birth center, I realized that my story had come full circle. Heartbreak had become strength. Betrayal had become clarity. Revenge, subtle, elegant, invisible, had become a quiet triumph. I stood taking one last look at the families, at the children laughing, at the mothers smiling. Every step forward was mine. Every act of kindness, deliberate or small, had mattered. I walked away slowly, carrying nothing but gratitude, subtle pride, and the knowledge that I had emerged unbroken. And as life moved forward, I moved with it, whole, empowered, and in control.